The crystal champagne flute slipped from my husband's hand and shattered against the polished concrete floor of his architecture studio when he saw me walk through the front door. The sound cut through the soft jazz music like a gunshot, and every single one of his 150 guests turned to stare at the woman in the charcoal pantsuit standing in the entryway. Behind me, 4 uniformed officers from the Massachusetts State Building Inspector's office filed in silently, their navy blue jackets bearing reflective patches that caught the warm gallery lighting. My husband Marcus stood frozen on the elevated platform he had built specifically for this moment, his arms still raised in mid-toast, his custom Italian linen blazer suddenly looking like a costume on a man who had no idea what was about to happen. Beside him on that platform stood Chloe, 23 years old, wearing a sleeveless emerald cocktail dress that left absolutely nothing to the imagination. Her hand was resting possessively on Marcus's lower back, and she had been laughing at something he whispered just seconds before. Now her smile evaporated. Her perfectly manicured fingers slid away from his suit, and she took an instinctive step backward, as if proximity to him might somehow be contagious. "Natalie, what are you doing here?" Marcus stammered, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent gallery space. His face had gone the color of cold oatmeal. "This is a private event. You weren't invited." I didn't answer him. I simply walked further into the room, my low heels clicking deliberately against the floor, and I let the silence stretch until it became unbearable. The guests, mostly developers and city council members, and the kind of Boston society wives who lived for moments exactly like this one, were already pulling out their phones. I counted at least a dozen recording lights blinking red across the room. The lead inspector, a sharp-jawed woman named Officer Reyes, stepped forward and unfolded a thick document from her leather portfolio. "Marcus Whitfield," she announced, her voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who had done this 100 times before. "By order of the Suffolk County Building Department and the Massachusetts Board of Architectural Registration, this premises is hereby placed under immediate administrative seizure pending investigation of permit fraud, zoning violations, and unlicensed structural modifications. You and your guests have 15 minutes to vacate." The collective gasp from the crowd was almost theatrical. I watched a city councilwoman near the bar set her drink down with shaking hands and immediately reach for her purse. 2 of Marcus's biggest commercial clients, men he had been courting for over a year for a downtown mixed-use project, exchanged a look of pure, undiluted horror and began edging toward the exit. Marcus finally found his voice, and it came out as a strangled bark of disbelief. "This is insane. This is my grand opening. You can't just walk in here and shut down a private celebration. Do you have any idea who I am? I am the lead architect on 3 of the largest renovation projects in the Seaport District." "Sir, step down from the platform," Officer Reyes said calmly. "We are not asking." That was when Marcus's mother, Diane, surged out of the crowd like a battleship cutting through fog. She was wearing a champagne-colored Chanel suit and a pearl necklace that probably cost more than my first car, and her face was twisted into the kind of public-friendly snarl that wealthy women perfect over decades of country club politics. She planted herself directly between me and the inspectors, her hands on her hips. "You vindictive little gold digger," she hissed at me, low enough that only the front row could hear. "You couldn't stand that he was finally building something on his own, so you had to come here and destroy it. You've always been jealous of his talent." I looked her dead in the eye and said nothing. I had learned years ago that Diane fed on reactions the way most people feed on oxygen, and starving her was the most satisfying form of revenge I could perform in real time. After 3 full seconds of my unbroken stare, she actually took a step back. Marcus had finally climbed down from the platform, and he was striding across the room toward me, with his hands raised in that infuriating, placating gesture he always used when he thought he could charm his way out of a problem. "Sweetheart, listen, whatever this is, we can talk about it. There has obviously been some kind of misunderstanding with the city. I have all the proper documentation. Let's just step into my office and figure this out before you embarrass yourself in front of these people." He reached out to take my elbow, and Officer Reyes was suddenly there, her gloved hand intercepting his wrist with surgical precision. "Sir, Do not touch this woman. She is a protected complainant in an active fraud investigation. Touching her right now is going to add a witness intimidation charge to your evening, and I promise you do not want that." The phrase active fraud investigation rippled through the gallery like a stone dropped in still water. I watched a man I recognized as the senior partner of one of Boston's biggest development firms physically recoil, then turn and walk straight out the door without even retrieving his coat. I finally spoke. I made my voice carry, because every single phone in that room was now pointed at me, and I wanted the recording to be clear. "I'm not here to cause a scene, Marcus. I'm here because last Tuesday, while you were having lunch with Chloe at the Ritz-Carlton, I received a courtesy call from the Suffolk County Permit Office. They wanted to verify some signatures on the structural modification permits for this building. Specifically, my signature on a personal financial guarantee for the load-bearing wall removal you authorized 6 months ago." Marcus's face went from oatmeal to ash. "I told them," I continued, "that I had never signed any such document, because I have never even seen this building before tonight. I told them that I had no knowledge of any structural modifications, and that any signature bearing my name on those permits was a forgery." The room had gone so quiet I could hear the soft whirring of the climate control system. They opened a file that afternoon. By Wednesday morning, the forensic document examiners had confirmed that my signature had been forged on 17 separate municipal documents. By Thursday, they had cross-referenced your business filings and discovered that you had also forged your mother's signature as a co-guarantor on a $180,000 equipment financing loan from First Commonwealth Bank. Diane made a sound behind me that was halfway between a gasp and a cough. I did not turn around. "By Friday afternoon," I said, "they had enough evidence to pull every permit associated with this property. The renovation you completed without proper engineering review is structurally unsound. The occupancy certificate you've been showing your clients is invalid. And the grand opening you are currently hosting is, technically, a code violation that could have killed someone if that mezzanine you illegally added had collapsed under the weight of your guests." A woman near the mezzanine railing immediately stepped away from it. Marcus tried to laugh, and it came out as a wet, panicked bark. "This is ridiculous. Natalie, you are my wife. You signed those documents. You don't even remember half the paperwork I have you sign because you trust me. You're confused. You've been under so much stress lately." "Marcus," I said quietly, "I am a licensed attorney. I have been a licensed attorney for 11 years. I do not sign documents I have not read, and I have never, in our entire marriage, given you authorization to sign anything on my behalf. You and I both know exactly what you did." He opened his mouth to respond, but Officer Reyes was already gesturing to her team. Two of the building inspectors moved to the back of the gallery and began unrolling yellow caution tape across the entrance to the renovated mezzanine. A third officer was photographing the structural modifications. The fourth was speaking quietly into a radio. The guests, who had been frozen in horrified fascination, suddenly remembered that they had places to be. The exodus began. Designer heels clicked toward the door. A catering manager hurriedly began wheeling away the champagne tower. The string quartet packed up their instruments without playing the final number. Within 7 minutes, the only people remaining in the gallery were Marcus, Diane, Chloe, the 4 officers, and me. Chloe was the first to speak. She had remained on the platform this entire time, her arms wrapped around herself, her eyes flicking between Marcus and the door, like she was calculating an escape route. "Marcus," she said, and her voice had a sharp edge I had never heard in her social media videos. "What is happening right now? You told me the studio was completely yours. You told me your wife had nothing to do with the business." Marcus turned to her with an expression of pure desperation. "Chloe, baby, this is just a paperwork issue. The city makes mistakes. We can fix this in the morning. Let me just talk to my wife." "Your wife?" Chloe repeated slowly. "The wife you told me you were already separated from. The wife you said had moved out of the apartment 3 months ago. That wife?" I did not even have to act surprised. I genuinely had not known what story he was telling her. I made a note to bring it up later, in front of a judge. Diane chose that moment to fully unleash. She turned on me with her finger extended like a weapon, her pearls swinging against her chest. You did this on purpose. You waited until tonight, until his biggest moment, just to humiliate him. You could have called the city office back and told them it was a mistake. You could have protected him. That is what wives do. That is what family does. I finally turned to look at her, and I let her see exactly what was in my eyes. Diane, I said, for 14 years I have funded your son's career, your son's car payments, your son's vacations, and the down payment on your beach house in Wellfleet. For 14 years, I have been told by you, repeatedly, in front of your friends, that I am not really part of the Whitfield family because I work too much and I chose not to have children. You told my own sister at Easter that I was a cold woman who would never understand what real family meant. You told the priest at your husband's funeral that Marcus would have been better off marrying someone with softer edges. So tell me, Diane, when exactly did I become family? Was it before or after your son forged my signature on 17 federal documents? Diane's mouth opened and closed twice before any sound came out. How dare you? How dare you speak to me that way at a time like this? My son's entire reputation is on the line. Your son, I said, forged your signature too, on a $180,000 bank loan. The bank is going to come for that house in Wellfleet, Diane. They are going to come for everything you own. So when you see your friends at the club next week, you might want to start workshopping how you're going to explain that one. The color drained from Diane's face so quickly, I worried for a moment that she might actually faint. She turned to her son, her hands trembling violently. Marcus, what is she talking about? What loan? Marcus could not look at his mother. He was staring at the floor, his shoulders hunched, his expensive linen blazer suddenly looking like a child's dress-up costume. Mom, I was going to tell you. I was going to pay it back before you ever knew. The clinic was supposed to clear $2 million in the first year. Easily. The loan was just a bridge. You forged my name on a loan? Diane's voice was rising into a register I had never heard from her, somewhere between a scream and a sob. You used my credit. You used my name. Marcus, that house is the only thing your father left me. Do you understand what you have done? I stepped back, because I did not need to be in the middle of that conversation, and I did not particularly want to be. Officer Reyes gave me a small nod and gestured toward the door. The inspectors had finished their initial walkthrough and were ready to seal the building. But before I could leave, Marcus suddenly straightened up. He had clearly been thinking, and his narcissism had clearly identified what he believed was a winning angle. He turned to the remaining officers and held up his hands like a man making a closing argument to a jury. Okay, fine. Let's say there are some paperwork issues with the permits. I will get those resolved. I will hire the best zoning attorney in Boston. But you cannot take this building from me. I own this building. I have a 15-year commercial lease on this property, signed and notarized, with a AAA-rated commercial real estate firm. The permits can be reissued. The renovations can be re-inspected. But the lease is ironclad. This is my address. This is my brand. By Monday morning, I will have new permits filed, and by next month, I will have rebuilt every relationship that walked out that door tonight. You think you've ruined me, Natalie, but you have only delayed me. He was actually smiling. He had convinced himself, in the space of 90 seconds, that he had just performed a brilliant pivot. Chloe was watching him with a look that was no longer disgusted, but actively calculating, the way a person watches a slot machine that might still pay out. I let him have his moment. I let him bask in his imaginary recovery. I waited until his smile had spread fully across his face, and he had begun nodding at his own reasoning, and then I opened the leather portfolio I had been carrying since I walked in. Marcus, I said gently, the commercial real estate firm that holds your lease is called Beacon Heritage Properties. That's right, he said, his chest puffing out, and their attorneys are not going to care about some marital squabble. Beacon Heritage Properties, I continued, is a wholly owned subsidiary of Concord Trust Holdings. His smile faltered very slightly. Concord Trust Holdings, I said, is the family trust that my grandfather established in 1962, that my father expanded in 1989, and that I have served as the managing trustee of since my father's death 7 years ago. I oversee a commercial real estate portfolio of approximately $400 million across the greater Boston metropolitan area. This building, the one you are currently standing in, has been part of my family's portfolio for 31 years. The smile died completely. You signed your lease, I said, with my company. You signed it with my signature on the landlord's line, which I also assume you did not actually read. Because if you had, you would have noticed that the managing trustee's name is the same as your wife's name. You have been paying rent to me, Marcus, every single month for the past 2 years. He was making a small wheezing sound. He took a step backward and bumped into the platform behind him. And as your landlord, I said, opening the portfolio and removing a thick, embossed legal document, I am invoking the moral turpitude clause and the criminal activity clause embedded in Section 12 of your lease agreement. The forgery of municipal documents and the fraudulent encumbrance of a federally regulated property constitute material breaches of contract. I handed the document to Officer Reyes, who handed it directly to Marcus. Your 15-year lease, I said, is terminated, effective immediately. You have until end of business Monday to remove your personal effects from this premises. Any property remaining after that time will be considered abandoned and disposed of according to Massachusetts commercial tenancy law. Marcus's hands were shaking so hard the document was rustling. He looked up at me, and for the first time in 14 years of marriage, I saw genuine, unfiltered fear in his eyes. Natalie, please, we can work this out. We can figure out a payment plan. I love you. I have always loved you. Chloe was a mistake. She was nothing. I was lonely because you worked so much. Please do not do this to me. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about the 17 forged signatures. I thought about the $580,000 I had transferred into his business account over the past 2 years. Money he had told me was going toward operational reserves and marketing infrastructure, but had actually gone toward Chloe's apartment in the Back Bay, the silver Porsche Cayenne in the parking lot outside, and the diamond tennis bracelet currently glittering on her wrist. I thought about every Thanksgiving I had spent listening to his mother explain to relatives that I was career-focused in a tone that made it sound like a venereal disease. Marcus, I said, you are confusing me with someone who still has a heart for you. I turned and walked out of the gallery. The cold November air on Boylston Street felt cleaner than anything I had breathed in months. I had only made it half a block when I heard the commotion behind me. I turned to see Chloe storming out of the gallery, her green dress completely inadequate for the 40-degree wind, her phone already pressed to her ear. She did not even glance at Marcus, who had stumbled out behind her with his hands outstretched, his voice cracking as he called her name. Chloe, wait, please. Where are you going? She spun on her stiletto heel and faced him with the kind of cold fury that only a 23-year-old who has just lost her meal ticket can summon. Where am I going? She snapped. I am going home, Marcus. To my own apartment. The one you told me you were buying for us. The one I just found out is owned by a holding company in your wife's name. The one I now have 30 days to vacate, according to the very polite woman who called me an hour ago. You knew about this? Marcus turned to me, his expression shifting from desperation to outrage in a split second. You contacted her? You contacted Your what, Marcus? I asked. Your girlfriend? Your mistress? The student you've been sleeping with for the better part of a year while telling her I had moved out? Yes. I called her. I called her this afternoon, as a professional courtesy, because unlike you, I do not believe in collateral damage to women who have been lied to. Chloe was glaring at him now with naked contempt. You told me she was a corporate workaholic who didn't even know what your face looked like anymore. You told me she signed off on us. You told me she was happy you had found someone who actually appreciated you. Chloe, listen, baby, I can explain. Do not call me baby. She was actually shouting now, her voice carrying down the empty Boston street. Do you have any idea what I have given up for you? I left my graduate program for you. I told my parents I was in love with a successful architect, not a married fraud. I introduced you to my friends. My father is going to lose his mind when he finds out. Do you know who my father is, Marcus? My father is a partner at Hartford and Bain. He is going to find every single one of your remaining clients and personally explain to them what kind of man you are. She turned on her heel again and stalked toward a black sedan that had just pulled up to the curb. She slammed the door so hard the chassis rocked, and the car peeled away from the curb without a backward glance. Diane emerged from the gallery a moment later, escorted by one of the officers. She had been crying, and her perfect makeup had streaked into something resembling a Halloween mask. She locked eyes with Marcus, and whatever was left of the doting mother I had watched coddle this man for 14 years died right there on the sidewalk. "You forged my name," she said, her voice flat and dead. "You forged my name on a bank loan. You used me. You used your own mother." "Mom, please. I was going to fix it. My house," she whispered. "My house in Wellfleet. The bank is going to take my house." She walked past him as if he were a piece of street furniture. She did not look at him. She did not look at me. She got into a waiting town car and disappeared into the Boston night. Marcus stood alone, on the sidewalk, in his expensive linen blazer, the wind cutting through fabric that was never meant for November. He looked at me, and his face was the face of a man who had finally, fully understood that there was no clever pivot left, no charming explanation, no last-minute reversal. The lights inside his gallery were already going dark as the inspectors finished sealing the building. I did not say goodbye. I did not need to. I walked to my car and I drove home to the brownstone on Beacon Hill that he had never actually owned, even though he had told everyone at his country club that it was his. The divorce was finalized 14 weeks later in a courtroom on Pemberton Square. Marcus arrived in a suit that looked like it had been purchased at an outlet mall. He had lost 20 pounds. His hair, which he had always meticulously colored, was now showing the gray he had spent years hiding. His attorney, a tired-looking man who had clearly been retained on credit, made a desperate motion to discharge the $600,000 Marcus owed to my trust through Chapter 7 bankruptcy. My attorney, a brilliant woman named Vivian Mercer, stood up with the patience of someone who had been waiting her entire career for a moment this satisfying. "Your Honor," she said, "the plaintiff has no objection to the defendant filing for personal bankruptcy. We do, however, request that the court formally acknowledge that pursuant to United States Bankruptcy Code Section 523, subsection A, paragraph 2, debts incurred through fraud, false pretenses, or false representation are categorically non-dischargeable. The defendant did not merely default on a commercial obligation. He committed wire fraud, identity fraud, and forgery against his own spouse and his own mother." The criminal complaints from the Massachusetts Attorney General's office are attached as Exhibit C. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Judge Patel, glanced through the exhibit, set it down, and looked at Marcus over the rim of her reading glasses. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, "you appear to have also surrendered your architectural license to the State Board last month in lieu of formal disciplinary proceedings. Is that correct?" Marcus nodded mutely. "And the State Board has imposed a 5-year prohibition on any application for license reinstatement?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Then I find that the debt in question is non-dischargeable in its entirety. I am also granting the plaintiff's request for a permanent wage garnishment order in the amount of 25% of all future earnings from any employer until the principal of $647,000 plus accumulated interest is satisfied. Given the defendant's age and earning capacity, the court projects this will require approximately 28 years. She brought the gavel down. I walked out of the courthouse into a cold March drizzle, and I felt absolutely nothing for the man I left behind. A year and a half later, on a warm September morning, I unlocked the front door of the building on Boylston Street myself. The architecture studio was gone. The pretentious concrete floors and the illegal mezzanine had been ripped out. In their place was a warm, light-filled space with reclaimed oak floors, exposed brick walls, and arched bay windows that let the morning sun pour across a bank of comfortable consultation chairs. The brass plaque beside the door read, "Concord Women's Legal Aid Center, Pro Bono Family Law and Domestic Financial Recovery Services." I had funded the entire renovation myself, The center provided free legal representation to women navigating divorces from financially abusive partners, with a particular specialty in cases involving forged documents, hidden assets, and fraudulent business practices. We had a staff of 12 attorneys and 4 forensic accountants. In our first year of operation, we had recovered over $4 million in stolen marital assets for our clients. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was the automated notification from my trust's accounting software. The monthly wage garnishment from Marcus's employer had cleared. He was now working as a junior drafter at a small residential firm in Worcester, taking orders from a man 15 years younger than him, and 25 cents of every dollar he earned came directly to me. I walked through the lobby, greeted my receptionist, and took the staircase up to my office on the second floor. The morning consultation calendar was full. A woman whose husband had drained their joint account to fund a girlfriend in Miami. A woman whose mother-in-law had pressured her into co-signing on a business that turned out to be a money laundering front. A woman whose husband had quietly transferred their house into his brother's name without telling her. 12 appointments before lunch. I opened my laptop and began reviewing the first case file. Outside my window, a woman was walking her daughter past the building, and the little girl pointed up at the brass plaque and asked her mother what it said. I could not hear the answer through the glass, but I watched the mother kneel down and explain something carefully, and I watched the little girl nod with absolute solemnity. Diane had lost the Wellfleet house, exactly as predicted. She had moved into a small senior community in Quincy, and according to the one mutual friend who still spoke to both of us, had not heard from Marcus in over a year. Chloe had married a hedge fund manager from Greenwich within 8 months of the gallery incident, and was, last I checked, posting curated photos of her toddler on a private Instagram account. I had nothing left to say to any of them. I had stopped being angry months ago. Anger requires that the other person still occupies space in your mind, and I had quietly evicted every single one of them from that real estate as well. What I want every woman watching this to understand is that the weapons used against you in these situations are almost always the ones you handed over yourself. The trust, the shared accounts, the signature on the line you didn't read because you were tired and he was rushing you, the agreement to let him handle it because the paperwork was boring and you had a deposition in the morning, the choice to believe him when he said his mother didn't really mean it that way, when she very obviously did. Take your weapons back. Read every page. Verify every signature. Keep your own accounts. Keep your own attorney. Keep your own copy of every single document that has your name on it, in a safe deposit box he does not know about. Build your career. Maintain your credit. Never, ever, allow yourself to become financially dependent on a man who has demonstrated, even once, that he is capable of lying to your face. And if the worst happens, if the man you trusted decides that your love is a resource to be extracted rather than a gift to be honored, do not waste your tears on a confrontation. Do not give him the screaming match he wants. Do not hand him the emotional victory of watching you fall apart. Instead, become very quiet. Become very organized. Document everything. Hire the best attorney you can find. And when the moment is right, walk into his world, wearing your most expensive suit, with the law and the receipts and the inspectors at your back, and let him discover, in real time and in front of an audience, exactly who he chose to underestimate. The most dangerous woman in any room is not the one who is screaming. It is the one who has been quiet for a very long time and has been using every minute of that silence to prepare. If this story spoke to something you have lived through, or something you are living through right now, please share it with another woman who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Restoration Stories for more accounts of women who refuse to be erased, and remember that the only thing standing between you and your freedom is the decision to stop apologizing for taking up space in your own life.